Let's say you were tasked to create a presentation about a complex topic like photosynthesis. You have some idea about the topic, but you're not sure how to relay what you know in an informative presentation that will not bore your audience to death. To avoid this, you started thinking of things that you can do to spice things up. As you are trying to assess the pros and cons of adding memes to your material, you find yourself at an impasse. Adding these things will certainly make for an interesting and entertaining presentation, but it might be too distracting that it will hinder you from achieving your instructional goals. Doubts start to creep in on the other aspects of your presentation. Should the script be conversational or formal? What about the narration? Are you supposed to use your own voice to narrate your script? Or are you better off using machine-generated voiceovers like the ones you hear on TikTok? If any of these things ring true, then you might benefit from knowing what are the 12 principles of multimedia learning.
In his 2001 book, Multimedia Learning, Professor Richard Mayer proposed a dozen of tenets that discuss the proper use of media in designing learning materials. These 12 principles are grouped into three main categories, which include reducing extraneous processing, managing essential processing, and fostering generative processing.
The 5 principles under the reducing extraneous processing category are intended to prevent overloading learners with information. This is achieved by stripping the learning material down to its core components, leaving room for learners to have the cognitive capacity to engage in essential and generative processing.
Extraneous processing can be minimized through coherence, signaling, redundancy, as well as spatial and temporal contiguities. By understanding each of these principles, we are able to create a learning material that follows a well structured design, which draws the attention to pertinent information through visual and oral cues. It might be tempting to add a bit of flair to a learning material to make it more entertaining. However, according to the coherence principle, keeping the presentation simple will allow learners to lock in on the important details of the lesson instead of getting distracted by irrelevant texts, pictures, and or sounds. Speaking of getting distracted, there's only so much information that our eyes and brain can process before we get overloaded. Therefore, the redundancy principle posits that learning materials are better off having just graphics and narration as opposed to adding captions or text in it. Directing a learner's attention to an important section of a paragraph or a slide is vital for them to better understand what is being taught. As such, using visual cues such as highlighting a word is just one of the many strategies that can be used to achieve this according to the signaling principle. Another way to ensure that learners are focusing on the pertinent details of the lesson is by placing pictures along with descriptive text or captions in an ideal location. Moreover, spatial contiguity principle suggests that these two media should be in close proximity with each other to achieve the desired effect.
Meanwhile, temporal contiguity principle suggests that learners can easily build the mental connection between the graphics and words when they are presented at the same time. So it should look something like this, but definitely not like this. Hi, it's me again. Feel free to skip this part if you just wanted to learn about the rest of the 12 principles of multimedia design. So yeah, those are the 5 principles that are used to reduce extraneous processing. But before we dive right into the next category, I just wanted to thank the sponsor of today's video. Nah, just kidding. There are no sponsors to thank for this video. Lack of monetization aside, this break is meant to provide some context about the design choice that I made for this presentation. As mentioned at the start of this chapter, avoiding information overload is the main goal for the principles under the reducing extraneous processing. With that being said, I decided to use a PechaKucha style presentation because I feel like it perfectly embodies what the first 5 principles represents. I won't go too much into the details of what a PechaKucha presentation is, but it basically forces you to dump everything down in an effort to fit everything you wanted to say about a particular topic within 20 seconds. This means that there's really not much room or space to fit any shenanigans that you would normally insert in a video like this. This fast-paced presentation comes at the cost of some entertainment value, but you can bet that the resulting material will definitely adhere to the first 5 principles, even without giving too much thought about it. With that squared away, let's go ahead and jump right into the next category.
Managing essential processing is aimed at breaking down complex essential materials into smaller, more manageable pieces that would be easier for the learners to digest. When done correctly, learners are able to commit important details of the lesson to their working memory and eventually to their long-term memory. There are 3 principles involved in managing essential processing, which include segmenting, pre-training, and modality. The latter is somewhat similar to the redundancy principle, while the other 2 has less to do with the elements used on the learning material and more on how the information is delivered to the learner. In the segmenting principle, a complex subject matter is divided into multiple essential materials to make it more manageable for the learners. These bite-sized information are then presented in a sequential manner, and learners are given sufficient time to absorb these pertinent details by allowing them to control the pace of the presentation. Meanwhile, the pre-training principle involves priming the learners before the actual lesson. This is done by giving learners an instructional material that contains vital information about the lesson that they are about to undergo. Providing an overview or what's in it for me are also good examples of this tenet at work.
Lastly, the modality principle suggests that using narration and animation in a learning material is better than a picture plus printed text combo.
This is because the former takes advantage of the learner's 2 senses, sight and hearing, instead of solely relying on sight to process the information.
Once again, the PechaKucha presentation is a perfect candidate for managing essential processing. Not only does it divide a complex topic into 20 bite-sized segments, it also makes use of graphics and narration to present essential materials to the learners. Furthermore, a few slides can be dedicated to serve as a pre-training if and when the situation calls for it. Lastly, since this learning material is going to be uploaded on YouTube, learners have the ability to skip, pause, or go back if they miss a relevant information, which is a key component of the segmenting principle.
The last of the 3 categories is called fostering generative processing. It discusses how we can tap into the precognitive capacity of the learners that we've worked so hard to prevent from overloading, to encourage them to actively make sense of the information that they've received or currently receiving. This can be achieved through the use of high-quality and relevant images accompanied by a natural-sounding human voice for narration. This tandem, along with a well-thought-out script, form a multimedia stream that learners can easily relate to. Implementing these strategies will prevent generative processing underutilization, where a learner is unable or unwilling to engage with the learning material despite having the cognitive capacity to do so. This explains why the multimedia principle emphasizes the use of 2 or more forms of media, because people learn better from words and pictures than from words alone.
Although computer-generated voiceovers, like the ones you hear on TikTok, have come a long way since the publication of Mayer's book, the voice principle posits that nothing beats the real thing. Therefore, you need to put your well-written script to good use by doing the narration yourself or hiring voice actors to do it for you. The final piece of the puzzle is putting a face to your presentation, as suggested by the image principle. This could either be your own face as a talking head video, or a relevant image or animation that would complement your awesome voiceover. Whether you are an aspiring instructional designer or a student like myself who is tasked to create an open educational resource, understanding the 12 principles of multimedia learning will help you create a learning material that is both informative and engaging to the learners. There you have it, folks. Those are the 12 principles of multimedia learning. If you're interested to find out more about PechaKucha, head on over to the link at the description section below. In there, you'll also find the link where you can download the presentation that I used, as well as the link to a document with a list of references that I used in making this video. Don't forget to leave a like and share this to anyone who you think might need some tips on creating a learning material. Also, constructive feedback is always welcome, so leave a comment below on how I can improve my future videos. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.